You can judge me. I know what I did sounds wrong. But behind every mistake, there's a story. And mine? It began the day Ethan walked into my life and flipped everything upside down. I didn't set out to betray anyone. I wasn't chasing a thrill or trying to blow up my life. Honestly, I was just trying to remember who I was before life made me forget. Before I became someone's wife, someone's mom, someone's dependable or responsible. Before I got so good at disappearing in my own skin. You ever look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back at you? Not because she's changed, but because she's been fading for years and no one even noticed? That's who I was. That's where I was. Lonely in a house full of people. Tired of being needed, but never wanted. Smiling at PTA meetings, folding laundry at midnight, pretending I didn't miss touch. And then he came along. Ethan. You know how sometimes you meet someone, and before they even say a word, it feels like your whole soul just exhales? That's what it was like. No warning, no roadmap. Just that quiet, dangerous sense that everything was about to change. The first time I asked him what he wanted from me, he didn't answer. He just looked at me, like he already knew I'd break. Like he saw every wall I'd built and wasn't afraid of any of it. It scared the hell out of me. Because you don't come across people like that often, the ones who see straight through you. And when you do, you either run or you fall. This isn't a story about cheating. It's a story about being seen. About the parts of ourselves we bury so deep, even we forget they're there. Until someone comes along and gently, almost accidentally, brings them back to life. So, yeah, you can judge me. But before you do, listen. Because if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been the one holding it all together, if you've ever looked at someone and thought, God, I wish I met you when I was still allowed to want things, then maybe you'll understand. Maybe you'll see what I saw. And maybe you'll stay until the end, even when it gets hard to watch. Because this is the truth. It was just another Wednesday. You know the kind, where the hours bleed into each other, and the only real sign of time passing is the pile of dishes in the sink and the sound of my daughter's shoes thudding across the hardwood floors upstairs. I'd been working from home for years. Freelance editor. Deadlines. Manuscripts. Quiet. A lot of quiet. I'd carve out little corners of the day just to feel something. Sip lukewarm coffee by the window. Organize already organized bookshelves. Scroll through old photos on my phone, pretending I wasn't aching for a version of myself that felt alive. Matt, my husband, we'd been married 14 years. He's a good man. Always has been. Steady. Predictable. Never cruel. But you know what's worse than someone yelling at you? Someone forgetting you're there. He used to look at me like I was the sun. Now, I was just the person who bought toilet paper and scheduled dental appointments. We barely touched anymore. Even when we shared a bed, it felt like we lived in 2 different time zones. And then came Ethan. He was helping Matt with a side project in the garage, something to do with restoring an old motorcycle. He was new at Matt's firm. Young. Way too young. 25, maybe? Sharp jawline, sleeves always rolled up, a kind of restless energy that made the air feel warmer when he was around. I remember the first time I saw him, through the kitchen window. He was laughing at something Matt had said, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. I thought, too young, too bold, too curious for someone like me. I didn't even expect him to notice me. I was just the wife. The woman in yoga pants carrying laundry baskets and reminding people to take out the trash. But then one afternoon, I was struggling to move a box of old books from the hallway to my office. Out of nowhere, I hear a voice behind me. Need a hand? I turned, and there he was. Ethan. Smiling, casual, like we weren't separated by a whole decade of life. I laughed nervously, said something like, sure, if you don't mind lifting literature. He looked at the box, picked up a paperback from the top. The Bell Jar, he read. Then he looked up at me, not with judgment or indifference, just interest. Grew up with a mom who read this on repeat. You a Plath fan? That stopped me cold. No one had asked me about my books in years. Not Matt. Not even my friends. I felt my chest tighten, that strange mix of embarrassment and gratitude. I nodded. Yeah, it's dark, but it speaks to something I don't usually say out loud. He raised an eyebrow. Maybe that's why I like it too. We brought the boxes into my office, a small sunlit room tucked in the back of the house. I watched him take in the stacks of paper, the sticky notes lining my corkboard, the half-empty coffee mug with lipstick still on the rim. He didn't say much after that, but he lingered. And I noticed. It wasn't that he looked at me like I was beautiful. It was that he looked at me like I wasn't invisible. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself replaying the conversation. Not his words, exactly. Just the way it felt to be seen. I'd forgotten how addictive that could be. To feel noticed. Not because you were useful, but because you were you. From then on, he started stopping by the kitchen before heading out to the garage, asking what I was reading, telling me which podcasts he thought I'd like, asking questions, real ones, that made me feel like I hadn't disappeared into motherhood or marriage or middle age. And every time he did, I felt something shift inside me. Something slow, subtle, like waking up from a long nap in a house you barely recognize. I should have shut it down. I should have kept my distance. But you don't know how starved you are until someone feeds you something you forgot you were hungry for. And Ethan? He didn't offer me attention. He offered me curiosity. A mirror I hadn't looked into in years. That was the beginning. Just a few innocent moments. Nothing out of line. Nothing. Yet. But that's the thing about forbidden stories. They never start with betrayal. They start with kindness. A hand on a box. A question about a book. And a woman remembering she still has a heartbeat. It's strange how little things become everything. How a few extra minutes in the kitchen turns into the part of your day you start waiting for. After that first moment with the books, Ethan started coming by more often. Earlier. Lingering a little longer. Always with a reason, dropping off something for Matt, grabbing a tool he left behind. But there was something in the way he lingered. He'd lean against the counter like he belonged there. Ask if I wanted a coffee while he made his. Then pour it the way I liked, oat milk, no sugar, a dash of cinnamon. I never told him that. He just noticed. We started talking more. Not about the weather or the news, but real things. Art. Music. Old movies. He asked what I listened to when I worked. I said I stopped playing music a while ago. Silence made it easier to concentrate. He said, no one's ever too busy for beauty. And then he sent me a playlist. I listened to it the whole next day. One afternoon, Matt texted that he'd be working late. So I poured a glass of wine and sat out in the backyard. The sun was just starting to dip, that soft golden light that makes everything look gentle. Ethan showed up unexpectedly, holding a bag of screws or something I wasn't paying attention to. And instead of heading to the garage, he paused when he saw me. Mind if I sit? He asked, holding up the bag like it was a valid excuse. I hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. I poured him a glass. We sat in quiet at first. Birds. The occasional buzz of a neighbor's lawn trimmer. Then he turned to me and said, "What did you want to be before life happened?" It was such a simple question, but it cracked something wide open in me. I laughed, a little too loudly at first, mostly out of surprise. No one's asked me that since college, I said. Well, he smiled. Tell me. I looked down at my glass. I wanted to write. Not edit, write. My own words. My own stories. I paused. But then bills and diapers, and grown-up stuff kind of, took the pen out of my hand. He didn't say anything right away. Just listened. And you know what hit me? How rare that had become. To speak and not be interrupted. To say something small and have it land like it mattered. A pause. The soft clink of her glass against the patio table. It's the way he looked at me. Not like he wanted something from me. Not like he was biding his time. But like every word I said had color. Texture. Weight. And for the first time in years, I laughed without feeling like I was apologizing for it. We talked until the sun went down. The kind of talk that makes hours disappear. At one point, I passed him his glass and our fingers brushed. Just barely. But it was enough to make my skin tingle. There was a moment, the kind you don't see coming until you're in it. Long eye contact after a joke. His smile holding just a bit too long. My breath catching for no reason at all. And inside my head, chaos. What are you doing, Danielle? He's just being kind. He's young. You're married. I told myself that every time he left. Every time I caught myself watching him walk out to the garage. Every time I glanced at the clock, wondering when he might stop by again. But even as I pushed the thoughts away, they came back stronger. I noticed myself doing stupid things. Putting on lipstick, actual lipstick, before he came by. Changing into that soft blue sweater he once said looked like sky on skin. Adding earrings, just in case. And he noticed too. He'd glance at me with this amused curiosity, like we were both aware of the game we weren't admitting we were playing. One day, as he left, he paused in the doorway and said, "You always smell like citrus and books." Then he laughed, shook his head like he didn't mean to say it out loud, and walked out. I stood there for a full minute. Heart racing, mouth dry, mind full. He was saying things without really saying them. And I was hearing them, feeling them in places that had been asleep for too long. A breath. Deeper now. Slower. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was reading too much into harmless moments. That I was lonely. That it was innocent. But if I'm honest, I knew exactly what it was. The warmth. The curiosity. The attention. It wasn't an accident. It was a slow unraveling. And I was letting it happen with every smile, every glass of wine, every glance held just a little too long. This wasn't love. Not yet. This was temptation in its purest form. The beginning of a story I wasn't supposed to write. But I was already holding the pen. It was one of those thick, moody nights. The kind where the sky turns charcoal and the air feels like it's holding its breath. The rain had been threatening all day, soft taps against the windows, a low rumble in the distance. Matt had gone out of town for a supplier meeting. Some last-minute thing he said couldn't be rescheduled. Then the roads flooded. Power lines down. He called from a motel room, said he'd have to stay the night. It should have felt normal. It wasn't the first time he'd been gone overnight. But this time, something hung in the air. The house went dark around 7 p.m. No warning. Just a sudden silence, no hum from the fridge, no buzz from the overhead lights. I lit a few candles, boiled water on the gas stove, made myself a mug of peppermint tea. The thunder was louder now. Closer. Then came the knock on the back door. I wasn't expecting anyone. But somehow, I wasn't surprised. I opened it, and there he was. Ethan. Rain clinging to his hoodie, hair damp, eyes scanning mine. He held up a flashlight. Just wanted to check if you were okay. Saw your lights were out. I should have said I was fine. I should have thanked him and shut the door. But instead, I stepped back and let him in. The house was warm with candlelight. Soft shadows dancing on the walls. We sat on the living room floor, leaning against the couch, tea in hand, while the storm raged outside. It should have been awkward. But it wasn't. It was quiet, comfortable. His jeans were still damp from the rain. He smelled like pine and something deeper, something that reminded me of the woods in fall. That mix of earth and wind and fire. We talked about the storm at first. About how old this neighborhood's wiring was. But then, the silence stretched. And in that space, something shifted. He looked at me. Not just at my face. Into me. And then, softly, like a confession meant only for the candles to hear, he said, "You don't have to pretend anymore." My breath caught. I laughed, too quickly. Pretend what? But I couldn't hold his gaze. He set his mug down. Turned fully toward me. and reached out slowly, deliberately, his fingers grazing the side of my face. Just the backs of his fingers. Featherlight. Tracing a line from my temple to the curve of my cheekbone. I flinched. Not from fear, but from recognition. It wasn't the touch that scared me. It was the knowing that I wanted more of it, that I'd been waiting for it. A breath. Deep. Quivering. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Because everything in that moment, the flicker of the candlelight, the hush of the rain, the way he was looking at me like I was a poem he'd memorized, it all said what words couldn't. I didn't kiss him. He didn't kiss me. But something broke open inside me that night. I stopped lying to myself. I admitted what I'd been trying so hard not to feel. I wanted him. Not just the attention. Not just the thrill. Him. His mind. His gentleness. The way he saw me when I wasn't even sure I still existed. And right when it felt like the moment might tip, when the space between us became so small it ached. Thump. A footstep. Upstairs. We both froze. I held my breath. Then, a second sound. The creak of a bedroom door. My daughter. I stood up so fast my mug tipped, spilling cold tea onto the rug. I should check on her, I said, my voice all wrong, breathless, high, like I'd been running. Ethan just nodded. No anger. No pressure. Just understanding. I walked upstairs. Checked her room. She was fine, half awake, mumbling something about the thunder, then drifting off again. But I stayed up there. Long after she'd fallen asleep. And when I came back down, he was gone. Only the empty mug and the smell of rain remained. A pause. Longer now. Her voice softer, vulnerable. That night didn't end in a kiss. But it changed everything. It wasn't the moment we did something. It was the moment I knew I would. And once you admit that to yourself, there's no going back. The next 7 days felt like I was holding my breath underwater. Every morning, I'd wake up and pretend nothing had happened. Pretend I didn't feel the brush of his fingers on my cheek every time I closed my eyes. Pretend I wasn't replaying that night over and over like some secret movie only I was allowed to watch. I avoided him. I heard his voice through the kitchen window when he was in the garage with Matt. Laughed too loudly, like I was okay. Like I was still the same woman who folded laundry and planned dinner. But I wasn't. I was cracked open now. And the air stung. Then, Matt left for a conference. 3 days out of town. Just me and my daughter at home. Routine. Quiet. That first night, I told myself I'd go to bed early. Read a book. Keep things simple. Safe. But by the second day, I stopped pretending. I texted him. Just 4 words. Can you come by? I didn't even think about it. Didn't rehearse it. Just hit send. He replied within a minute. I'm already outside. My heart stuttered. I walked to the door, fingers trembling. And when I opened it, there he was. No rain this time. No storm. Just the cool hush of evening light, the kind that turns everything blue and silver. He stepped inside. Quiet. Careful. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. I closed the door behind him. He took 1 step closer. And that's when it happened. The first kiss. But it wasn't what people think. It wasn't some frenzied grab in the heat of desperation. It was slow. Almost reverent. He looked at me like I was made of something delicate. Something worth worshipping. And when he kissed me, it wasn't hungry. It was searching. His lips barely brushed mine. A whisper of touch. Like he was asking a question. And I answered. God, I answered. We didn't rush. There was time. And in that time, I learned the weight of being wanted. Not just touched. Not just kissed. But seen. Held like I mattered. We didn't sleep together that night. Not yet. But we crossed the line. And once you do that, you can't uncross it. The next few weeks were a blur of contradictions. Mornings were normal, School drop-offs, editing manuscripts, small talk with Matt over coffee. But then there were the fragments. The stolen hours. He'd come over when Matt was at work and my daughter at school. An hour here. A kiss pressed into the back of my neck as I stirred pasta. A poem slipped into a book I'd left on the porch swing. He started leaving notes in the spines of novels. Little scraps of handwriting, sometimes a line of poetry, sometimes just, "You. Always you." And I started wearing red lipstick again. But only on the days I knew he'd come by. Only for him. I felt like I was living two lives. In one, I was the mother folding laundry and attending school meetings. In the other, I was a woman in love with a man who wasn't hers. Every moment with him felt like oxygen. And every moment after, like drowning. Because the guilt never left. It sat with me in the silence. Clung to me when I watched my daughter sleep. There were nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of mother I was becoming. What kind of wife? What kind of woman? And yet, I couldn't stop. He made me feel alive. But every heartbeat felt like a betrayal. Every time I heard Matt laugh at one of my dumb jokes. Every time my daughter hugged me with her whole body. I felt the weight of what I was hiding. The enormity of it. But then Ethan would touch my face. Or look at me like I was a galaxy. And, for that 1 second, I'd forget the shame. I'd remember only the thrill of being wanted, desired, chosen. And that's what scared me the most. Not that I was doing something wrong, but that it felt so right. This wasn't just about passion, or rebellion, or even escape. It was about being seen. Truly. And once someone sees you like that, you'll do anything to keep it. Even if it means losing everything else. It was only a matter of time. I used to think I could keep everything separate. Boxed up. Tidy. Wife. Mother. Mistress of my own emotions. But love, or lust, or whatever this thing with Ethan had become. It doesn't stay in its box. It leaks. And suddenly, everything I touched started to feel soaked in it. Matt noticed first. Of course he did. He didn't say it outright, not at first. He's not the type to yell or throw accusations. No. Matt watches. He's quiet. One morning, I was brushing my hair in the mirror and he stood behind me, towel slung over his shoulder. And he just looked at me. "You've been glowing lately," he said. Half laugh. Half suspicion. I smiled, too quickly. Too falsely. Made some comment about sleep and vitamin D. The kind of thing I knew he wouldn't question too hard. But the truth? I was glowing. Not from wellness. From him. Ethan. His fingerprints weren't just on my skin anymore. They were starting to show up in my eyes. The way I walked. The way I breathed. I didn't know how to hide it. And then our daughter found the note. I'd tucked it inside a book, a slim paperback Ethan had borrowed me. I thought I'd been careful, but she pulled it off the shelf while looking for something for school. Opened it, pulled out the slip of paper. She was 13, old enough to read, but not quite old enough to read between the lines. She read it out loud at the kitchen table. To the woman who reminds me what it means to feel, even in silence. Always yours. E. I nearly dropped the bowl of cereal in my hands. She smiled and asked, "Is that from your book club?" I forced a laugh. Said yes. Told her it was a character writing a letter to another character. She nodded and moved on. But my hands were shaking for an hour afterward. I kept seeing the words, "Always yours," and realizing how reckless I'd become. And Ethan? He didn't make it easier. He started asking for more. A weekend away. A drive to the coast. To see me in the daylight, not just behind curtains and locked doors. "Let's go somewhere no one knows us," he said one morning, tracing the inside of my wrist with his finger. It should have been romantic. It should have thrilled me. But instead, I felt a cold drop of fear slide down my spine. "This wasn't meant to be a life," I whispered. "It was just meant to be a feeling." He looked hurt. confused. But he didn't argue. Not then. I started lying more, slipping up. Once, I told Matt I had a migraine, locked myself in the bedroom, lights off. But I was texting Ethan under the covers, heart racing every time I heard a footstep in the hallway. I forgot things. Groceries. Appointments. I'd be halfway through dinner prep and realize I didn't buy the chicken. Or I'd be at a parent-teacher meeting and completely zone out while the teacher spoke. Even my best friend, Claire, who's known me since we were kids, started noticing. One afternoon over coffee, she tilted her head and said gently, "You don't seem here anymore." I froze. Gave her some vague answer about being tired, overworked. She didn't push. But her eyes said she didn't believe me. And then came the tipping point. Matt planned a surprise date night. He never does things like that, he's not the spontaneous type. But he made dinner reservations, got our daughter to sleep over at her friend's, even picked out a dress from my closet. I was supposed to be home by 6. But I wasn't. Because I was with Ethan. In a parking lot by the lake, in the back seat of his car, my hair tangled, my cheeks flushed. I didn't hear my phone buzzing until it was too late. 20 missed calls. 3 texts. "Where are you? Everything okay?" I made plans for us. I felt the blood drain from my face. I rushed home. Tried to beat him there. To fix it. To undo the unraveling. But when I walked in, he was already sitting at the kitchen table. A candle half burned. The dress he picked still laid out across the couch. His face, unreadable. I opened my mouth. And nothing came out. Just silence. And for the first time, I realized. This wasn't just a game. Not just a thrill. Something was slipping through my fingers. Something I might never be able to hold again. Pause. Voice low, cracking slightly. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if I wanted to save it, or if I just didn't want to be caught. I didn't even take off my shoes. I remember that part so vividly. Coming in through the back door, the sound of the deadbolt clicking behind me, the way my heels felt too loud on the hardwood. Like my guilt had a rhythm. I thought the house would be quiet. I hoped it would be. But he was there, sitting at the dining table. No dinner. No candles. Just Matt. Still. Silent. Holding my phone in his hands. And I knew. I knew in the same way you know when a glass is falling before it shatters. The air changes. The silence becomes deafening. He didn't say anything right away. Just held the screen up for me to see. One of Ethan's messages. And a picture. Not explicit, but enough. Too much. I opened my mouth to speak, but all I could manage was a sound. Small, pathetic. Like the first crack of ice before it splits. Matt's voice was low, but it cut sharper than if he'd screamed. "Is this what you've become, Danielle? A stranger in your own home?" I flinched. Because he wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. He was disappointed, shattered. And somehow that hurt more. "I've been here," he said, his voice breaking. "All this time, paying the bills, loving you the only way I know how. And you've been somewhere else." I didn't lie. I couldn't. What do you say when the truth is already sitting between you like a loaded gun? I whispered, I didn't mean for it to happen. He laughed, short, bitter. No one means to burn down their house. But here we are, standing in the ashes. Then the worst sound. A small, broken voice from the stairs. "Mom?" Our daughter. Hair messy from sleep, eyes wide. She'd heard us. Of course she had. And in that instant, I didn't feel like a woman caught in an affair. I felt like a mother who'd just broken her own child's sense of safety. She started to cry. And all I could do was stand there. A mess of lipstick smudged on my collar, perfume that didn't belong in this house, and silence, filling the spaces where truth should have lived. Matt got up, took her in his arms, held her like I hadn't held either of them in weeks. He didn't tell her what happened. Didn't need to. Kids know. They always know when love has left a room. Ethan tried to call that night. Twice. I stared at his name on the screen, fingers trembling. I wanted to answer. God help me, I wanted to run to the only place I still felt wanted. But I didn't. I turned off my phone, then I blocked his number. And, just like that, I cut him off. Not out of anger. Not even regret. But because I finally saw the cost of what I'd been borrowing. I went upstairs and sat on the floor of the bathroom. The tiles were cold beneath me. And I cried so quietly I made myself sick. The moment I saw the look on Matt's face, I knew I had just broken something I could never fix. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure if I deserved to try. I moved out 2 weeks after it all came crashing down. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No shouting. No pleading. Just cardboard boxes, a quiet Saturday morning, and the sound of my daughter's footsteps echoing down the stairs as she handed me her stuffed fox. "Take it," she whispered. "So, it doesn't feel like you're alone." The place I moved into was small. 1-bedroom rental on the edge of town. The kind with peeling linoleum and a faucet that squeaks when you turn it off too tight. But it was mine, and for the first time in years, there was silence that wasn't laced with guilt. Matt and I agreed on shared custody. Our daughter would spend weekends with me, weekdays with him. Every Sunday night, I'd fold her clothes into a little overnight bag and watch her leave from the doorway. That moment, the one where the door clicks shut, it cracked me open every single time. I stopped working. Freelancing felt too heavy. Too many words I couldn't connect to. So I told my clients I needed time. And then, I let the time happen. I started therapy. Not because I wanted to fix what I'd done. That part felt irreparable. But because I had no idea who I was anymore. Outside of being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's mistake. The therapist asked me, "When did you stop choosing yourself?" I didn't have an answer. So I began looking. Long walks. No music. Just the crunch of gravel beneath my sneakers and the occasional sound of leaves brushing against each other like secrets. Journaling came next. Not pretty journaling, not Pinterest-worthy quotes or affirmations. Just rage. Pain. Guilt poured out like ink-stained confessions on cheap notebook paper. I cried in the shower so I didn't have to hear myself. Cried into towels. Into soup. Into the space where Ethan's name used to linger on my tongue. I picked up a paintbrush one evening. It was buried at the back of a storage bin, still wrapped in old newspaper. I hadn't painted since my daughter was born. Marriage made it seem indulgent, unnecessary. But now it felt like breathing. I painted until my fingers ached. Not flowers, not sunsets, just whatever came out. Anger, loneliness, the shape of a woman who didn't recognize her own hands. And then, one afternoon, there was a letter. No return address. Just my name in Ethan's handwriting. I knew it instantly. The loops in the D. The way he always slanted his E's. I held it for hours. Just stared at it. Felt the weight of it in my palm. I didn't open it. Couldn't. Because I knew if I did, I'd fall back into that place. The one where longing feels more urgent than healing. So I burned it. Right there in the sink. Watched the edges curl like flower petals in reverse. And as the ashes floated upward, I let go. Not of the memories. Not of the feelings. But of the story I'd been telling myself. That love had to come wrapped in fire and risk to mean anything. It didn't. It could be quiet. Gentle. Rooted in the kind of forgiveness that starts inside your own chest. I didn't just lose Ethan. I lost who I was pretending to be. And somehow, in the ruins of all of it, I began to find who I really am. It had been 2 years. 2 whole years since I'd last heard his name. Since I'd seen that tilt of his head, that quiet intensity in his eyes. Since I burned that letter in the sink and told myself, enough. I'd come a long way. Not perfect. Not healed in the way people think healing looks. But whole. Quietly, steadily whole. That day was unremarkable at first. Rainy. Late autumn. The kind of gray sky that makes you crave tea and silence. I was at the bookstore, my little ritual after therapy. Same aisle I always wandered into. Poetry. Not because I wanted anything specific, just because sometimes words know how to find you when you least expect them. A faint bell jingled over the front door. I remember because it always did, and I remember because this time I looked up. And there he was, Ethan, standing near the window, holding a toddler in his arms, a little boy, maybe 2. His hair was longer, his face a little fuller. There were soft lines near his eyes now. Still handsome, but not in the way that pulled me in anymore. In the way that reminded me of a chapter. A page already turned. He didn't see me right away. He was crouched down, showing the boy a pop-up book about dinosaurs. Laughing. Not the laugh I remembered, deep and hungry. This one was lighter. Grounded. Happy, maybe? I should have walked away. Slipped behind a shelf and vanished into nonfiction. But I didn't. I stood there, watching, and maybe for the first time, I saw him not as the man who unraveled me, but as someone who had needed to be seen too, just like I did back then. And then he looked up. Our eyes met. And time, that cruel, spinning thing, just stopped. No rush of blood. No flutters in my chest. Just stillness. Peace. He smiled, not in a way that asked for anything. Not the smile that pulled secrets from my lips once, but one that simply acknowledged me, as if to say, I remember, but I don't need to relive it. I nodded. Small, barely there, but enough. I didn't stay, didn't approach, didn't ask if the boy was his. I turned, tucked the poetry book under my arm, and walked toward the door. No tears, no music swelling, no dramatic ending. Just release. Because some stories don't end with a kiss. Some end with a quiet understanding and a promise to never forget. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? That kind of love that feels like a secret fire burning just beneath your skin, too dangerous to share, but too powerful to ignore? Would you risk everything, your home, your family, your own peace, just for a glimpse of that happiness? Even when you know it could all come crashing down. I have. And maybe, somewhere in your heart, you understand exactly what that feels like. I want to hear from you. Your regrets. Your secrets. Your truths. The stories you never told anyone else. Because here, in Cheating Confession Diary, we don't judge. We listen. We understand. So, if you're ready to step into the raw, the real, the untold, hit subscribe. And let's walk through these forbidden stories together. Because sometimes the truth is the most forbidden story of all. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter the mistakes, you're never alone.